very policy rich. It doesn't necessarily have specific targets, objectives, or strategies. And so with the updates of the comprehensive plan, what we'd like to do is actually use this data and information so that we can be much more emphatic about the priorities of what needs to happen to move the city forward for the next 20 years, as opposed to just having a list of good intentions. In our third performance indicator, this is really about, again, about planning and designing and developing communities. And we do this, I want to point out, we do this in collaboration with our intergovernmental partners. So we do it a great deal with Metro Transit and MnDOT. We do it with the Park Board, with the DNR, particularly the Critical Area Plan, and we also work a lot with Hennepin Community Works. And so some examples of that cross-agency collaboration are through the West Broadway Alternatives Analysis, the C line and the D line and the Orange line, as well as really extensive work with our colleagues in Public Works and Metro Transit on Southwest LRT and Bottineau LRT. And also I want to point out in that we also spend a lot of time and energy on actually enhancing the physical environment. And a lot of that is through our urban design work, but it's also through our Art in Public Places program. The Art in Public Places program reached a new milestone this year with the leadership of Council Vice President Glidden and Councilmember Reich. We have updated the ordinance, and that ordinance now calls for the equivalent of 1.5% of the city's net debt bond to be allocated to the Art in Public Places program. And that is for new commissions and for what I call once-in-a-generation conservation projects. So some examples of those that are going on currently or have recently been finished up is Birds of a Feather on Nicollet Avenue South, the conservation of the Powderhorn Gateway on Powderhorn Lake, ongoing work related to Nicollet Mall, the Bigger Seed Project, the 39th Street Ped Bridge, the 26th Avenue Greenway, and so on. And this year we are also implementing a recommendation from the Finance Department, which is that we have a regular maintenance fund so that we can do annual maintenance on the city's growing collection of public art, and that is in the general fund as opposed to bonding for that on a regular basis. So I hope that helps give a quick overview, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Dr. Byers?
Thank you.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you, Jack. Thank you, Steve. Hopefully you find this information valuable. I know this is new and adding information relative to outcomes and impact, but I think it's important for you to know how the money that you're investing in CPED and the outstanding work that staff is doing under the leadership of our executive team here. It's important for you to be aware of the amazing work and accomplishments that we are having in serving this city. With that being said, I'd like to, and certainly, Mr. Chair, I am remiss in not acknowledging when I introduced my leadership team in the very beginning, I forgot to acknowledge my deputy, Chuck Lutz, who is back here, so I would like to take the opportunity to also recognize him. He is here with us this afternoon.
Yeah, he's new.
I would like to ask you now to turn to page 58. You had it there. Okay. So, as you're certainly well aware, the mayor's recommended budget also included a reduction of $260,000, and I would essentially like to share with you or explain to you how that reduction will be addressed. As you can see, when identifying where these cuts would occur, we certainly made an effort to avoid cuts that would, first of all, impact staff, that would impact business line services and programs. And so essentially the areas that we identified with the help of Mark Ruff and his staff, we're looking at our professional service categories. And as you can see, try to equally distribute the cuts across professional service categories. Long-range planning, $45,000. Housing policy development, $90,000. Economic policy and development, $60,000. And development services will be cut $65,000. I must admit, although we will be able to absorb these cuts, it does not come without consequences. Hiring consultants is a critical and important resource that helps to support the important work that CPED does. We use consultants frequently for a variety of different reasons, ladies and gentlemen, whether it's analysis work, whether it's research, whether it's project management, whether it's contracting with external service providers. We cannot absorb future cuts. I guess my point is what I'm leading to is we cannot absorb future cuts across our professional service categories in the future. If we get cuts in the future, it will impact programs, services, or worst, our staffing composition. So with that being said, Mr. Chair, all I have to add.
Thank you. Quick question on these reductions. Are they, do they zero out those contracts, or is this unspent balances? I mean, is this the only amount, for example, in housing policy development, $90,000 contract, professional services contract?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do these cuts represent the extent, the total extent of those professional contracts, or is this just a reduction of the contract amount within those divisions?
This is just a reduction. I mean,
Okay.
This is not all of our professional services.
I just want to make sure we weren't zeroing on it.
To the imagination. Sure.
Thank you. Are there other questions from council members? Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Taylor, this past year, your organization went through a pretty thorough audit, in particular about your CPED loans, and a lot of recommendations came from that audit.
Yes.
The things that have to do with loan monitoring and loan compliance recommendations, implementing tracking systems and that sort of thing. And I'm curious, I don't see that anywhere in your budget presentation. So is that something that you believe will be entirely assumed by existing staff and resources next year?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Chair, yes. Next year we will kind of address that. We're still working through that process. I know Director Frank and other members of the CPED staff have been working extensively with Will Tetzel and his team to kind of address some of the issues that came out of the audit and thinking about what are some of the strategies that we will employ moving forward to kind of address a number of the issues that were identified as part of that information. So.
Thank you. I know you hadn't given back your recommendations or your response to that audit formally, but I thought it would have been somewhere in here. So thank you for that clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
So mostly operational in nature, not budget related, is what you're anticipating for 17.
Mr. Chair, yes.
Very good.
That's correct. Sure.
Mr. Frank,
Director
please.
Frank.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Palmisano, so generally the answer to your question is yes. I would say we have staff who are working on the response and what our operational response will be. For a significant portion of the audit findings, some of the operational response will include our new MINS computer system, which is not an expense that will be entirely CPEDs and not expected to fully hit in 17. So I just wanted to clarify that, but generally the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, that particular item is, I know, noted in the CARS request as we're going forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Frank.
Councilmember Yang has a question.
Mr. Chair, with that, I'd like to certainly move forward with the last portion.
Let me just move forward with I was going
Yes.
with. Councilmember Yang had a question.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I can wait until the presentation is over. I thought Mr. Taylor was actually concluding the full presentation for CPED.
I thought so as well. I didn't know. Are you continuing?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Reimer.
Yeah, one more small segment, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
we do. What's our timeline? I thought we were at the appointed hour here.
We are wrapping it up. We just have one more
Okay, very good.
segment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reimer, welcome.
Director Ryan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Please refer to slide 60, which is relevant to what we've just been talking about here. Our top priority for CARS funding for 2017 is the replacement of the MINS system. That's a system that's at the heart of a lot of the issues that were identified by the internal auditor. The mayor is recommending about $1.746 million and change in 2017 for capital funding for us to continue the project of replacing the MIN system. Now, this budget recommendation is for funding within the IT department. So if you're looking at the numbers in the spreadsheets, you'll see it within their department. But it is directly responsive to many of the shortcomings that the internal auditor found. The existing system is obsolete. It was custom built in the 1990s. It's based on a platform that's no longer supported. Staff has resorted to many workarounds and shadow systems, and there's multiple entry points, duplicative entry that can result in errors. So all of these things are mechanisms that our staff have kind of reverted to in a heroic fashion to overcome the shortcomings of antiquated technology. And so it will be very important for us to continue with the investment that the mayor and council made last year for this year to start the project. We do anticipate developing the RFP in January of 2017. We've been working this year developing the requirements, and those are very close to being wrapped up. So that's with respect to MINS. If you'll look at slide 62, please, we'll talk a little bit about CLIC. And I think Jack Byers also already had given you a good rundown of the art and public places CLIC funding here. The mayor's recommending $455,000 in funding there, and that's 1.5% of the net debt bond exclusive of parks and street infrastructure. So that's that. And with respect to the other item here, the development infrastructure program, $500,000, and this is a joint effort between CPED and Public Works so that we're able to seize opportunity when it presents itself, leverage city dollars with private investment so that we can do our work more productively and efficiently. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Not seeing any questions about this topic, but we still have Councilmember Yang. Would you like to pose your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just go back to the small business assistance outreach, the small business liaison position. With regards to that, I'm just wondering, I mean, when I think about that within the context of, what I see on a day-to-day basis, I mean, typically speaking, we have small businesses that are established and they need help and, they need, I guess, navigation through, our system, but we also have, I guess, undiscovered small businesses or small businesses that are, I guess, in the incubation stages. And, I'm wondering, like, what the focus is with regards to this navigator, whether they're much more focused on, existing small businesses and helping them to remain and continue, or are we, having this position for small businesses that are basically on the cusp of starting, or what's the end goal here?
Mr. Frank?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, yes.
Everything.
Yeah. So as I mentioned somewhat earlier, before we finalize the job description for this position and then before we post it, we will be engaging with the community to hear what their thoughts are on the needs that are out there. So we have heard everything that you just said and then other things as well. We need a single point of contact so we know who to call and who we shouldn't talk to first. Should it be licensing? Should it be zoning? Should it be planning? So we've heard that. We have also heard, I didn't know that you had business lending programs, and I have heard, I didn't know you could help us find workers. So helping to sort through those issues, and then I would say coming back to some of you and saying, how do we prioritize these? Because it's one FTE. This person is not a superhero, I assume. And so we will have to do some prioritization. The answer is we don't know exactly how the priorities will fall.
And Mr. Chair, one last question. With regards to the Opportunity Hub, is maybe two questions. One is, with regards to the $75,000, I mean, is that going to be contracted out to some agency to do that? And then the second question is, I mean, is this sort of maybe like a pilot where if it works, I mean, we're going to, replicate it, let's say, on the north side or elsewhere in places that need it? Just because, when I look at it, I mean, I'm just thinking, I mean, who's going to do it?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang. So just to be clear, the $100,000 that's in 2016 is capital towards the build out of the space in the West Bank in a specific building. The $75,000 in the mayor's proposed for 2017 is for operating, and the answer to the question is yes, it would be contracted out to a provider, exactly who I still believe to be determined. And we are one funder, subject to your approval, we are one funder among many of this exercise. It's not just the $75,000 that would make this happen. It's our $75,000 plus funding from other sources that would make the operations happen. And at the moment, we don't have thoughts about how to replicate this. It's thought of as a pilot, and then we would try to do some lessons learned from it.
Just to add to what Director Frank has certainly shared, I think it's also important to clarify that the $100,000 and the $75,000 has been leveraged to create a $1.5 million pool of funds that will be used to support the Opportunity Hub. One of the other points that I think is important to make, that as part of that in conversation with Councilmember Wasami, he is also looking for a liaison of sorts that will be responsible for helping to support the hub and address some of the same issues in the immigrant and Cedar Riverside community that this liaison position will do in the broader community. So that will be a discussion that we will certainly want to have with most of you kind of moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you for your time this afternoon. We don't have any additional comments, and that concludes our presentation.
Good. Thank you very much. Not seeing any additional questions or comments. Thank you for your presentation, and further questions are always welcome, I'm sure. And we'll also pose some comments through Ms. Green as we'll continue to feed back to my colleagues. So we're ready to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
We're ready for continue our 3 o'clock, pretty close to on time. We'll be looking at the Regulatory Services Department budget presentation, which is scheduled from 3 to 3:30. Allow any time you need to make that transition, Mr. Schickman. It's under slideshow.
Make sure we have the right one. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. Noah Schuckman, Director of Regulatory Services. I understand you've been here most of the day, and so I'll do my best to be fairly to the point today. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge I have a number of deputies and staff from the department here who, on the off chance I get stumped, will join me and help with the presentation. And I want to just thank, without going through their names individually, just thank them for their work in putting this together and the work that we do every day. We'll start with a quick look at our department org chart. The department in structure has not changed in the last year. We remain 4 field divisions and 2 administrative and operations divisions. An overview of our budget summary. You'll see the overall general fund budget is just over $19 million. And the change items that are in the mayor's recommended budget are just under $700,000, with half of that in one-time funding. On to our core programs. I will skip over an explanation of what each of the individual divisions does. Unless you have questions, please let me know. And I'll just highlight quickly one chart or measure for each division and then move forward. Starting with our administration and community engagement division. There are no change items in that division. And I want to take just a quick moment to note the top left where we highlight the Altogether Now effort, which is a joint effort. We work with neighborhood associations in the business community to do proactive notification of residents in particular neighborhoods of the inspections that will be coming, of exterior and nuisance issues, so that they're able to hopefully proactively do the work. One of the reasons I'm highlighting this is that if you look on the chart in green on the right side, you'll see that with the exception of the Howe neighborhood, we have seen dramatic reductions in the number of orders that we've written in those neighborhoods as a result of this effort over the last few years. Our general expectation with the Howe neighborhood is that we'll see a reduction in that neighborhood next year. The first, with the 2016 numbers, once they're finalized, 2015 was the first year that Howe was included in this program. And so we've seen that it takes a 2-year cycle to see those numbers go down. Moving forward to our Fire Inspection Services Division, just want to quickly call out that on the top right, you'll see that there continues to be an increase in the number of buildings, both commercial and high occupancy dwellings, and the number of dwelling units associated with those properties, which is indicative of the continued growth that we're seeing around the city and the continued additions to the workload of the inspectors. Continuing to housing inspection services, the same theme will show up there. We continue to see additional rental licenses being taken out in the city. As you see on the top left, we've seen a steady increase over the last decade in the number of rental properties which is reflective of the number of formerly home ownership properties that are now moved into the rental pool. The total number of rental units that we're at the moment for 2016 is 25,737 units in 17,273 properties. So those numbers have continued to go up in 2016.
Mr. Schuckman, I wonder if I could interrupt you. I was just reviewing the fire inspections sheet just before this, the slide before you. And this looks at 2015 numbers and the permits issued. If you could describe that setting. Does this represent growth?
It does.
And then what's the 2016 projection at what you're looking at?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a projection for 2016 handy. I'm happy to get that and get back to you, but it does represent the growth that we're seeing around the city. The permits issued and fees collected are associated with building permits, so the U.S. Bank Stadium is included in that, as are other developments.
And off the top of your head, in 16, is it more or less than 15?
More.
Significant.
So, and again, Mr. Chair, we'll get you more information on that, but it has continued to grow.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So unless there are questions on housing inspection services, I will move on to animal care and control, which is where we also have the first of our change items. The mayor's recommended budget includes 2 positions in Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. One is a veterinarian, which will allow us to do additional in-house veterinary work, which will increase the health of animals in the shelter, will make more animals available directly at MAC for adoption. Normally, if we have an animal that needs some medical care, we often send that off to a rescue group who does that care and then adopts the animal directly from the rescue group. Having the veterinarian on site will give us an additional medical option and give us the opportunity to keep more animals in the shelter and adopt them directly out to residents. Along that same line, we have there's a recommendation for an additional customer service representative who will allow the shelter to be open additional hours and give us substantially increased efficiency in processing of administrative licenses and permits. We have one customer service rep right now, and when we're not able to have her in the office, which is obviously she only works 40 hours a week, we are forced to backfill that position and use animal control officers. And so it takes staff out of the field, and this will give us greater field presence as well. I want to just quickly call out the bottom left chart, which refers to kennel outcomes for Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. Specifically, the continued increases in the number of animals that are being transferred to rescue groups and returned to owner. And both of those numbers affect our euthanasia rate. And as you can see, that has dropped over the last 3 years and is something we're quite proud of. The euthanasia rate there includes wildlife and other animals that are found injured and brought to the shelter and are required to be euthanized, and then any animals that are deemed to be dangerous to the public, as well as owner-released animals that are brought to the shelter for euthanization. In the operations division, I would just wanted to call out specifically that the division spends a great deal of time working on data, including the data you're seeing here today. In the last year, they've responded to more than 300 data requests of varying complexity. That includes a quick pull of information about one single-family home to a large profile of some of the city's larger property owners and the inspections that go along with that. Additionally, many of you have used the neighborhood profiles and the ward profiles that we have put together. Those were created in 2015 and have been fully updated for 2016. The intent is to do so again in 2017 and continue to provide current information. Finally, I will quickly talk about code compliance and traffic control, which is where our other change item is. And that is the mayor's recommended budget includes full-time change amount for 2 ongoing traffic control agents, which would help with the substantial increase we've seen in downtown traffic. I'm sure anyone who drives downtown has noticed that. It also includes continued funding for part-time traffic control agents, and that is there's 10 of those. That's a continuation of funding, one-time funding that was in the 2016 budget, and has allowed us to manage some of the increased workload over the last year. Along that line, you can see on the upper left there is a chart that shows a request for traffic management, and it's very representative of the work that's happening now associated with construction and with special events, which has been a major increase. And special events includes everything from open streets to events at the stadiums and around the city.
Is anybody able to just make requests of that nature? Or what kind of timing or decision making goes into whether you're going to deploy those resources or not?
Mr. Chair, committee members, we have contracts with the larger facilities, so U.S. Bank Stadium, TCF Bank, Target Field, Target Center, and so we supply traffic management around large events there. We certainly take requests for traffic management, but it is certainly dependent on workload, and these change requests are very helpful in allowing us to both manage the load that exists through events that are previously scheduled, like baseball, football games, and concerts, and then other events as they come up. Open Streets is one that we spend a great deal of time and energy around, and so this is a very helpful add for that.
Can you help describe the drop in revenues from 11 to 15?
Mr. Chair, committee members, without having it broken down specifically, one of the things we ascribe that to is the new meter system has been substantially helpful to people parking in the city and their ability to not be ticketed. And so there's a natural connection to the drop in revenue as we write fewer tickets and are doing less enforcement. We've spent, as you can see, much of that time that we would be spending doing the enforcement that is there. The enforcement still happens. We're writing fewer tickets, but then we're spending far more time managing traffic and dealing with events.
I had a feeling that was probably the answer. I just wanted to indicate that in the Public Works budget presentation earlier this morning, we made similar comments about how revenues in the parking fund are going up, but there's a corresponding decrease in the enforcement and the citations that are written. So,
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, just a summary of our one CARS request, and it is associated with the veterinarian at Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. As we've grown and as the shelter's operations have changed, we've identified the need to do some work in the shelter to better accommodate both staff and the veterinarian work that's happening. This $375,000 is the beginning of a request that we've made to do some work in the shelter and better accommodate the work that's happening there. With that, I will stand for questions. That is the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Not seeing any, except Councilmember Goodman. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Schuckman, on my favorite topic of animal control, I'm just wondering, I'm really glad the mayor agreed to fund the 2 positions she did, but you asked for 4. I'm wondering if you could talk about the other 2 and what we would be able to cover if we were able to have more animal control officers. I just recently had a situation where I had a dog that disappeared. In the end, the dog actually fell down a giant 6-foot tree stump and was entombed in the tree stump overnight, but we thought that the dog had ran away. And we tried calling animal control, and the hours are not perfect because we don't have the staffing. I'm just wondering if you were able to get these other 2 positions, what kinds of things could be improved in that realm? Because in terms of actual outcomes, it seems like that division has seen more outcomes and positive outcomes than almost any other in the city. I mean, take a look at it from a euthanization rate to a volunteers who are participating, getting a new shelter manager, hiring a veterinarian. These are all really upgrading things that we should do if we want to have a humane component to our animal control function. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about the 2 positions you asked for that were not funded.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, the 2 positions that were not included in the mayor's recommended budget are an additional animal control officer and then an animal care technician who would work in the shelter. And having both of those positions would allow the existing officer corps to be obviously bolstered by 1, but also to focus out in the field and increase the work that they're doing in the field. It would help to decrease response times and provide greater coverage around the city for the animal control function that we have, in addition to bolstering the animal care function in the shelter by having full-time staff there to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. It just certainly looks like, in terms of the numbers, having another person on the street would be helpful. We actually had more dangerous dog declarations this year than last, and the number of public safety type calls has gone up, not down. So it seems like that would say to me that having another person on the street would be a good thing.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, the one note on the public safety calls question, they have gone up. We also, in part, have changed the way we've coded those calls, and so that's partially what is reflected there in the chart. We have a better way to code them in our system and gives us a better breakdown of what each of those calls are. But certainly, to your point, having additional officers on the field would allow us to do better response and more response and be able to respond more quickly.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Really just because Councilmember Goodman had asked some additional questions about kind of what are your resource needs, I wanted to bring up something that I think is kind of general community questions about regulatory services resources, and that kind of goes to the capacity of the department to do the work in multifamily buildings. So maybe could you just talk a little bit about, I know that, and you might remind us too, kind of how recently it's been that there have been some increases in capacity for inspections, and kind of how you believe that your capacity, what your capacity is today, and kind of what your needs for resources are, just so we kind of have that picture a little bit better from you.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gooden. I think it was the 2015 budget included additional staff for fire inspection services, which handles the larger buildings. The 2016 budget included additional inspectors for housing inspection services, which was 4 more inspectors. And so we have bolstered in the last several years. We've bolstered both of those divisions with staff. We're very aware and part of conversations with community members and stakeholders about the role that inspectors play and the way that they do that. And in this year's budget, my priority was animal control and traffic control. But we have 6 full-time inspectors who do rental license inspections in high occupancy dwellings. We have 2 additional inspectors that do complaint inspections in those buildings. And through in 2015, we had just under 1,900 complaints that were responded to. 2016 to date, we've had 1,500, almost 1,600 complaints in those buildings that have been responded to. We continue to get to all those complaints and at the same time handle rental license inspections. I think that no part of the city or our operation is perfect, and we certainly look continuously to improve that and take a look at assessing the workload, particularly in the high occupancy buildings where we've seen some issues. But having said that, we continue to respond to all complaints and are getting out and handling those complaints when they do come up, as well as continuing to work with stakeholders and community members when problems are identified.
Just a quick question, Mr. Shipman. Are your staffing complement that's budgeted, are you experiencing vacancies in any of these areas, or how are you doing on being able to maintain the staffing level?
Mr. Chair, council members, we had a fairly decent number of vacancies in 2016, particularly in housing, where we had additional positions added for this year. But those have subsequently been filled. I think we are largely fully staffed at this point, and I don't think we foresee a huge turnover in the next year. We've been very lucky to fill positions with very qualified staff, and one of the things that we continue to prioritize is training and organizational development to keep them here and to encourage staff to stay and develop within the department. It's something that developing staff and growing them to move up in the department and around the city is something that I believe in and the leadership team believes in. We spend a great deal of time on that. And so we focus heavily on staff retention, and that's something that we will continue to do.
Good. Thank you very much. Just wanted to check in. Are there new questions from council members, or I'm not sure, Councilmember Goodman, if that's a leftover tag? Okay. Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Shipman, for not only your work today, but ending us on a busy day 9 minutes early. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.